Hello, everybody. I'm Phil Brandt, President and CEO of the AIM Employers Association, and welcome to This Week at Work.
This Week at Work is the only show about the workplace that offers you front row seats and a microphone, featuring experts in human resources and employment law to bring you practical, timely, and accurate insights so you can more effectively lead your organization. It's Thursday, February 29th, episode 268. Today, from the rise of AI to the advent of remote workforces, the landscape of the working world has undergone a facelift in a hurry. Amidst these changes, a constant challenge remains retaining your invaluable workforce. This requires a reimagining of what it means to work, as well as what it means to employ workers. Fred Falker is here to guide us through this paradigm shift in leadership, because if employers want to belong at the top, they must own a culture where employees feel they belong. All this and more on This Week at Work.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Happy to be here. Bert, welcome back. Are you back in town, or are you still somewhere out west?
No, I'm back in town. You can see I'm back in
I
town,
can see
Phil.
the office. Yeah, that's for sure. Right. You're not fooling me with that background. I'm not
Oh,
sure where you're at, but
yeah, come on.
I'm happy that you're back in town. I'm down in Orlando, Florida, visiting some of our members down here today and enjoying some of the weather. But I understand the Midwest weather still has been really good and enjoyable, and a little bit of a warm up for us through the month of February, which is unusual, but we'll take it.
Yeah, I'm not sure when you went down to Florida, Phil, but it's been cold here the last 2 days. It was 84 2 days ago, and as everybody here knows, it was I think 25 last night. So quite the swing.
Yeah, well, I had a great, beautiful day down here last few days, and we'll enjoy another one today. I got to say hello to our friend Fred Falker, back by popular demand. He's going to be at our Wayfinder Summit coming up. And I got to tell you, Fred has been one of our most popular guests, either on this show or at our summit. Fred, thank you for joining us today, and welcome back to This Week at Work podcast.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I was in Orlando last week and it was a little cool, but this is great. And I'm looking forward to the Wayfinders Summit.
Were you playing a little golf down here, Fred?
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm glad you got a chance to enjoy yourself, and hopefully you made some victories and maybe beat some of your buddies out of a few dollars along the way.
I won't say that, but
just in case they're listening, they're going to hold you to that. All right. We have a really busy show here this morning. I want to spend some time with you, Bert and Fred, of course, but we do have our poll questions to introduce. The first question here is, what are you doing today to create a higher sense of belonging with your employees? We got several responses for you, so that's going to be our theme in conversation, particularly with Fred. But what are you doing today to create a higher sense of belonging with your employees? That's our first poll question. And then how do you organize, measure, and how does your organization measure performance related in relationship to culture? Excuse me, I'm working on a smaller screen today. How does your organization measure its performance in relation to culture? And that's a open-ended word cloud, excuse me. And then what is culture to you? So those are some great questions, Nick. I love the fact that you do such a good job on that. And we'll be interested to visit those in a little bit when we get in conversation with Fred. But first, let's pull that lever if you're ready, Bert. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's roll.
All right, Nicky, pull that lever.
All right, it's time to look into what's trending in employment law. Lawyer, you're on the clock.
All right, so Phil, we're going to chat about a few things kind of all related today. We're going to be focusing on the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, and that's going to take us into a little bit deeper discussion about the EEOC and its regulatory agenda and some of its personnel that we're going to become familiar with over the course of the next year as we ramp up to a new election. So interestingly, on Tuesday of this week, a United States district judge in Texas held that the EEOC and the United States Department of Justice cannot take steps to enforce the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act against Texas or state agencies, since the omnibus spending package that the law was attached to was approved in late 2022 without a proper quorum in the House of Representatives. Okay,
so maybe a technicality, maybe there might be. Hey, but Bert, just remind us real quickly what the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act is. If anyone's listening and not aware, please.
Yep. Sure. So last year in I think it was June or July, a new law went into effect called the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, and what that law did was it bolstered legal protections for workers who are pregnant or have conditions tied to pregnancy and childbirth by requiring employers to offer reasonable accommodations to help those folks on the job. So the EEOC began accepting Pregnant Workers Fairness Act charges. Actually, it was last June when it took effect. And so since then, that has been a protected category. Pregnancy has been a protected category in and of itself, enforced by the EEOC. And people could bring charges of discrimination. So this judge in a 120-page order basically said that when the House passed its $1.7 trillion Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2023, it used a pandemic-era rule that allowed lawmakers to vote remotely by proxy. Texas had filed suit in February of 2023 claiming that the spending package violated the Constitution's quorum law, and the judge agreed. So again, for right now, confusion in Texas on whether the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act is actually enforceable. I don't think that this is going to have broader appeal beyond Texas right now, because the judge did not invalidate the law nationwide, just did it in Texas. And I do think that this one will be appealed. So
yeah, that's gonna be interesting to see that. I mean, and it gets back to what we're gonna chat with Fred about when you're talking about, like, I mean, in my mind, I'm like, okay, look, if a lady is pregnant and she needs some assistance and accommodation, it just seems like the right thing to do. The fact that we have to have a law for that. I know there's abuse, and I know we have all those scenarios, and that's why we have laws and policies and all these different things, but it just almost seems a little bit ridiculous. I don't know if you have an opinion in that space, Bert. I know you're going to just reflect the law, but
no,
I this going, all right, come on. If someone needs some help, my mother taught me to be a gentleman. Let's help them out.
Yeah, I think that that's right, Phil. But I think even more fundamentally, the law sort of already protected women in the workplace who had a pregnancy-related condition that needed some sort of assistance or accommodation, either under the gender discrimination laws or the Americans with Disabilities Act. I think that I think that protections already existed, but to the extent any employer was out there not making accommodations under the laws that already existed, this one sort of layered on top of it.
Okay, so hey, sir, that's great. Thank you. And I'm going to throw you a curveball, and I don't mean to do this, but I'm wondering if you can see the chat. We have a question here from Laura, and it pertains to our program last couple of weeks. She basically, they have a vendor or cleaning service that comes to clean at least once a week. They are an actual business with insurance. We advise which day works best for us. However, the owner will schedule what time her employees will show up to work. We agreed to provide the cleaning supplies. Is this an issue with the new laws regarding independent contractor?
So probably not going to be an issue.
I don't think so either. Yeah,
it depends on Laura. I'm not quite sure what your company does, but I assume your company is not in the business of cleaning, and so that this is truly a company that's coming in to do cleaning that's not part of your ordinary business. And then very importantly, the cleaning vendor that's cleaning your facility, I presume that cleaning vendor is actually a real business that you say in your comment here, they are an actual business with insurance, and importantly, presumably they clean other facilities of other companies as well.
That's where I was going to go to. Right. If they're only working for your organization one day a week and that you're using, well, they have their own insurance, that probably isn't going to muster the cut.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
Back to you, Bert. I
All
hope
right.
that helps you out, Laura.
All right, so then I want to shift gears since we're kind of talking about the EEOC anyway, related to the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. The EEOC late last year had come out with its regulatory agenda for 2024. And one of the main pieces of its regulatory agenda was the enforcement and the proposed rule implementing the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. And the agency expected to have drafted that rule. That act went into place again June 2023, and it requires employers with 15 or more employees to provide reasonable accommodations to current and prospective employees with no limitations stemming from pregnancy, childbirth, or related medical conditions. Now, it's really interesting because, again, similar to the ADA, the employer does not have to provide those accommodations if those accommodations would constitute an undue hardship. And like I said, this new law is kind of layered on top of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Americans with Disabilities Act, and it may expand some of the accommodations that employers need to make for pregnant workers. And some of those might include things like allowing pregnant workers to have water or food in the workplace, reducing their lifting requirements, providing pregnant workers the ability to sit, allowing them additional breaks to use the bathroom, eat, and rest, and excusing them from activities that involve exposure to compounds unsafe for pregnancy. And then finally, providing them with appropriately sized uniforms and safety apparel. So that's where the EEOC is going with the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. I want to make it very clear that employers, most employers, and if I've counseled you on this in the past, I've sort of already analyzed these types of issues under the ADA and Title VII to existing laws, but I want to make it clear that this does layer on top. And then real quickly, Phil, just a little bit more on the EEOC. I do want to chat a little bit, since their regulatory agenda is starting to get more attention. And one of the reasons for that is that back in August of last year, the EEOC finally got a full commission. They finally filled all 5 seats on the commission. And very importantly, the first time during the Obama administration that the Democrats actually had a majority on the commission during the Biden administration. And if you recall, I warned everybody that as soon as they became the majority on the EEOC, and it had to do with the expiration of the staggered terms of the EEOC commissioners, but as soon as they got the Democrat majority, watch out, the EEOC was going to get much more active. So last year on August 9th, Kalpana Kodagal became the 5th EEOC commissioner. By the way, she's going to be one of our guests and keynote speakers at Ogletree's Workplace Strategy Seminar, which is the first week in May of this year in Washington, D.C. She's joining us as one of the keynote speakers. Now, she was a civil rights and employment rights lawyer who practiced at what I would call plaintiff side employment firm, doing sort of the opposite of what I do. And then last year, also in October, the Senate confirmed Carla Gilbride as the EEOC's general counsel. Now, she's really got a fascinating background. She clerked at the 9th Circuit for a judge in the Court of Appeals over there. And she also was a co-director of a project called the Access to Justice Project at a nonprofit organization. She argued a case in 2022 in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, she's blind, and she is thought to be the first person first blind attorney who's ever argued before the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, she has been pretty quiet since she's gotten her position, but just this week, she called out and said that the damage caps under Title VII and of the Civil Rights Act and other laws that the EEOC enforces, she called those morally unacceptable. So a lot of people don't realize that companies with between 15 and 100 employees won't pay any more than $50,000 in compensatory and punitive damages if they're found to have violated the laws. For employers with between 101 and 200 people, compensatory and punitive damages are capped at $100,000. For employers with 201 to 500 workers, it's capped at $200,000. And for employers that have more than 500 workers, those damages are capped at $300,000. So sometimes we see these large verdicts, millions of dollars, and those verdicts get reduced substantially if they're brought just under federal law. We're taking state law out of the analysis right now. And this included a verdict last year. For example, there was a $36 million verdict that the EEOC won last year on behalf of a deaf applicant who was denied a truck driving position. And the ultimate award was $335,000, factoring in $35,000 for back pay. And so she again calls these damage caps morally unacceptable. And now the EEOC, interestingly, they don't have any authority or ability to change these damage caps. That would take a new law passed by Congress or an amendment of an existing law passed by Congress. But it does show you the EEOC's sort of priority in their thinking when it comes to damages and sort of their aggressiveness going after employers. So, and I think the flip side is well, let me say also that these damage caps were put in place back in 1991, and they have not been raised. And I do think she's got an argument there that perhaps they do need to be revisited at some point. But what the damage caps were designed to do was to prevent employment law litigation from turning into bet the company litigation, especially when you have employees who might be suing en masse, class actions, collective actions, those types of things, and also making sure that you have employees that are $20,000, $30,000 a year employees can't turn around and take a company down completely because they get a huge verdict. So that's sort of the flip side of it.
Yeah, that's there's a lot going on there, and I'm with you. Now I think all seats are full. I think we'll see the full force of the EEOC, which I just it causes us to focus on doing what is right, what is necessary. I really don't think the members that I work with, I know your clients probably the same, are out trying to do things purposefully wrong, right? We're doing our best to get it right all the time. And I would just want to refer to our chat here. Michelle had a great comment, and I see Michelle pretty regularly in our roundtables. But good morning, Michelle. Good companies exceed the requirements. They're just not trying to meet the minimums of the law. And I think that's a great segue as we move into conversation with Fred. And Fred, if I can invite you into the conversation here, I think this is just a great segue. Bert sets it up perfectly when he does these things. And we've been
You'd almost think we rehearsed it.
That is right.
Anyone that watches the show knows there's no rehearsing going on. So we've been talking a lot on the program about these issues, and they all impact culture. That's really what we're talking about, is culture, right? It's right. What our culture reflects, what we're willing to do. I always talk in our roundtables about a few things. Is that we talk about three things that have come out of our executive surveys. Over 1,000 executives, CEOs, CFOs across the country, and they had 23 or 27 different options to say what are their biggest concerns in the workplace. They had inflation, they had quality, they had managing the customer, all these business issues, and their top three issues by large percentages were retention, recruiting, and managing compensation, payroll, right? Managing the increasing inflation of compensation. And in my mind, I've been talking about that. I'm saying these three things are all related, right? If I can't retain, I got to recruit. When I have to recruit, I may have to pay more. I may have to pay more to retain. And all of that comes down to culture in some ways. When people leave sometimes, not always, but sometimes. And I want to always refer to what I like is the Herzberg two-factor theory model. And I talk about satisfiers and motivators, the basic table stakes, as you like to use that phrase. And I guess that's the phrase you and your friends use when you're golfing. And then also then we have then the motivators, the things that really get people excited and engaged and wanting to do a good job. So good morning, Fred. Welcome
Good
back to
morning.
the program. And I'd like to just get your take on retention as it relates to today's time and what you might have some insight on.
Well, thanks, Phil, for having me again. And I would say that of the three that you mentioned, of course, my work focuses on retention because it focuses on culture. I think Herzberg's theory is absolutely appropriate. It is something that I think all business leaders, all leaders should always consider. It's what is the culture of your organization like? Employees are going, if we're doing a good job of developing people and we've got people that are growing, they are going to leave. That's inevitable. But what we don't want to have is employees who are constantly looking for work. They've got their feelers out. They are willing to move for a nickel or a dime or just a couple of more dollars. Great cultures are places where people feel great about being there. And so that's really different than being satisfied with a job. What Herzberg essentially says is that there are a number of things that you simply have to do, you have to get right for us to not be dissatisfied. You have to pay me fairly. You have to give me a wage increase every now and
Fred,
then.
are you saying I shouldn't be excited and thankful that you're paying me fairly?
I am exactly saying that. You shouldn't be, I do a lot of work in the inclusion space. You shouldn't be excited because you treat me fairly, or that because you respect me, or that my pay is equitable. It's supposed to be like that. When you get those things right, you don't do something for me that makes me feel great about the organization. I don't want to leave a place where I feel that I belong because I know that most places I don't feel that way. I will leave for a great opportunity. I'll leave for a significant amount of pay, but you don't want me leaving, certainly if I'm valuable to you, simply because the guy down the street or lady down the street offers me a little bit more money. The culture of belonging is the way to protect against that. So when we look at recruitment and retention, recruit them into what? To say that we're fair, that we're doing what everybody should be doing is that's not saying much. When we walk into an organization that feels that this is a great place to be, it's a culture of belonging or a culture of inclusion, you feel it. It's not what we put on the wall. It's not our mission statement. It's not our purpose statement. It's not how much recognition we give. All of those things are important, but it really is about the behavior of people.
Yeah.
Right. So a better segue into this conversation than mine was really Michelle's comment that she made. Michelle said the good companies exceed the requirements of the law. They consider it the minimum standard. And Fred, I think that's kind of exactly what you're talking about. They're not doing it because the law requires it. They're doing it because they want to be a good employer. They don't want to lose that employee to somebody down the street for a couple pennies an hour more, $1 an hour more. They want to create that culture that people want to be at.
I think that's exactly right. In the past, I've done an awful lot of customer service work. There is a difference between saying to somebody, hey, how was the service? And you say, well, it was pretty good. It was not bad. It was all right. That's different than being able to say, wow. When you have a wow culture, it is because you are going well above the mark, but it's not just what you do, it is how ultimately you get us to do. So in a culture of belonging, it's not just the acts and actions of leadership, it is also how that culture helps all of us treat each other differently. In today's world, we've got so many divisions and so much polarization, so much fragmentation. When you find a place where employees see each other as human beings and treat each other, it's hard to leave that place for the place where we're anonymous, where we're objects, where we're there getting the job done. We don't mind being in those places. But if we had our druthers, we'd rather be in a place where we know leadership cares about us. And anybody just following the law So Michelle has it exactly right. Is not.
Think about that. Think about that as a recruiting strategy. Hey, come work for us. We follow the law.
Right.
That is right.
Yeah, I always we talk a lot about compensation and where employers try to land in compensation. We all understand I'll call them blinking words, these words that have different meanings to them, where we'll say, well, we pay, we pay competitively. What's that mean? We pay at midpoint.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, well, another way to say that is, well, we pay very average. So come work for us. We pay very average and we follow the law. That's not going to be a good place to start.
That's now, right. We've got an average culture. No one is mad.
Yes, no one's overly mad. We're not being sued right now.
Yet better than the company that says, come work for us. We don't follow the law. We have a miserable culture.
My goodness. You're so right, Bert. Hey, Fred, let's just spend the last few minutes. What is it that makes this so hard to get right? Why is this hard for leaders to get it right when it's so obvious? Even when I'm talking with leaders that don't get it right, they would agree with us. They would agree with what you and Bert and I are talking about here.
I think, again, go back to what Michelle said. We believe that if we're treating people fairly and professionally and respectfully and we're equitable, then we are doing what we are supposed to do, which is true. But we leave businesses to go to the company down the street because there is something different about them. Organizations that create a culture of belonging, there is something fundamentally different. It comes from the acts and actions of leaders and leadership and how they make us feel. And so when I feel better about myself, feel better about my opportunities, possibilities of growth, all of those things become part of it. I see in the survey a lot of things that you would want to do. I want to be proud of the company that I work for. Sometimes what we're doing is not something that I'm going to be proud of, but what we do in the community is important. My leader cares about me.
Yeah.
I care about others here. That's the job of leadership, to create that kind of culture where it feels special. Some people don't like the word family. I don't care what word you use. We care about each other and we treat each other differently. We're not looking at all of these things that break up the rest of society. In here, it's different. Now, at home, I may be the same old guy, but when I come here, I know Fred. I care about him. I know he cares about me. It is different here. When we can get that, that is the job of the new work of leadership, as I call it, in terms of the Wayfinder presentation. It's the new work. It's thinking differently. It is providing that wow service. It's going beyond. It's telling people that we see them as human beings and that they matter to us, not an intellectual thing. They matter because they do.
And I think, when I'm working with leaders, I'm talking about, look, as leaders, I have to surround myself as a leader with other leaders who prescribe to that, right? I need leaders who are on that page. They're not faking it, right? We believe it from the inside out. Because if we're faking it, when our back is against the wall, we're going to revert to our natural style, whatever that might be. Hey, Nick, can you pull up the meme we have on family? It was one of the pre-show memes. Fred, I want you to take a look at this and see if you have an opinion on this here. It's quite funny.
You know what? I'll have to pull that up. We used that previous show, and it's I don't have it quite up, but I'll pull it up.
All right, I'm putting Nick on the spot there, but it's really about I need to surround myself with people who are like-minded in those values. And, in the way that we're going to run an organization. And if I'm not surrounded by that, as the leader, it almost doesn't matter what I think, because the actions are being carried out by others, not by me. I can't touch enough people every day to make that impact.
You have to have leadership at every level in the organization doing that. Some organizations, frankly, have a great leader, but he or she is not doing what's necessary to make sure that leadership, that kind of leadership, is throughout the organization. Organizations have to say, we're going to hire leaders who lead in this way. They have to let people know, here are our expectations for leaders. We want leaders that care about people.
I think that's exactly right, Fred. So we're up against the 8 o'clock hour, and it's been great having you on the program again. I think I'll take us out today and just offer a couple reminders for folks that we've got the Wayfinder conference coming up just in a couple weeks here, and then of course we've got AIM's big program coming up in May. Thank you again to Phil. Thank you to Nick, Fred, especially thank you to you. And that's going to conclude our program for today. We'll be back on next week, Thursday morning, 7:30 Central Time. Now go out and be good to people.
Oh, you stole his tagline. That's awesome. Michelle gets the gold medal today. Thank you once again for tuning in to This Week at Work. If you enjoy the show, please share it with your colleagues. Forward our invites. Share the link, aimea.org/This Week at Work, or follow or subscribe wherever you get your news and entertainment. LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, we're everywhere you are. Don't forget you can be part of the show. Send your questions and comments anytime to info@thisweek.work. We'll see you next week, 7:30 a.m. Central Time, when we discuss what's happening this week at work.